Halo 3 ODST feels different from the other Halo titles. Other Halo games tend to take place on, well, Halo rings and other kinds of Forerunner infrastructures. They also tend to have a somewhat straightforward storyline. Halo 3 ODST, on the other hand, takes place entirely on Earth. It doesn't focus on the Forerunners, the Flood, or the inside politics of the Covenant. It focuses on the civilians, the regular inhabitants of New Mombasa, when faced with the overwhelming cruelty of the Covenant military. This game also opts for a less linear narration than the standard Halo game. You start the game in the desolate and deserted streets of New Mombasa, occupied by the Covenant forces. The story is told through various objects found in the streets, each triggering one of the game's missions when examined. It is also told through the various audiologs spread through the hub level, and finally the story is also told through environmental storytelling. The numerous dead bodies lying in the streets, the graffitis on the walls, the debris of a space elevator scattered here and there, all of them silent witnesses to the events that transpired here. But even silent witnesses may talk if you know how to hear them. By far the most intriguing element of environmental narration are these glyphs, scattered in the streets of New Mombasa. These glyphs are invisible to the human eye. They only appear when you have your night vision activated. Which admittedly is almost all the time given how dark this game is, but still. You can also tell that these glyphs are of alien origin. The mystery behind these glyphs has sparked a huge enthusiasm in the Halo community. For those who are new to this mystery, I'll drop here a short summary of how it went until now. Halo ODST was released in 2009. Some theories were thrown around, but nothing major was found. Joseph Staten, the lead writer behind Halo 3 ODST, did confirm that there was a story behind the glyphs, and he also hinted that this story might be linked to the Forerunner origins of the engineers, since most of the glyphs are shaped like Forerunner ships. 5 years ago, the YouTube channel RocketSloth made an update on the mystery of the glyphs, sparking a new fire of interest within the community. And honestly, I think the efforts of the community went a little too far, or at least in the wrong direction. People started to speculate about bugs in the physics engine, search for hidden meaning related to classical literature, try to decipher the various signs in reverse African Braille, Morse code, and binary. Marty O'Donnell, the lead sound designer on the Halo series, chimed in with cryptic messages of further references to classic literature and poetry. 1 year later, on Marty O'Donnell's Discord server, some guy proposed that the glyphs don't actually mean anything and are only here to make the fans ask questions and investigate further into the other secrets hidden through the game, the classical literature referenced in the game, and more obscure secrets of the Halo universe, such as the Cortana letters, and Marty O'Donnell gave this comment a thumbs up. RocketSloth made a follow-up video on the glyphs mystery, where he developed this conclusion.
I think if we look at that Occam's razor hint as any clue, we should just look at the glyphs specifically for why they are there. Those why glyphs exist so players specifically ask the question, why are these here? It's literally the simplest solution, but since Bungie spent so much time crafting this universe with so many nods, Easter eggs, and homages to different literary works, different inspirations, and other types of things just hidden throughout the universe of Halo, there's an infinite number of things that fans can continue to dig into for years to come and still uncover new references and clever homages to other things that are existing within the Halo universe. I don't think it's crazy to think that when Marty saw a lot of people still looking for the glyphs a decade later, jumping on board with pointing out something as simple as a T.S. Eliot poem would do exactly what the glyphs were meant to do when they were originally put there. Make players ask the question, why are they here? And by using T.S. Eliot, there's hundreds of references to Hollow Men throughout all of Halo. Fans would instantly find something within a few minutes of just looking up what fans have discovered in the past, and then go from there and expand from there and make these other connections. And it's awesome because
And Marty O'Donnell left a comment on this video with a bunch of cryptic lines that, if you keep the letters at the start of each line, spells out bingo.
And since then, nothing much has happened, leaving RocketSloth's video as the most up-to-date information one can find about the glyphs. This conclusion is disappointing. I do see the general poetry behind it, that the meaning behind the glyphs were the friends we made along the way, but it doesn't really fit with Halo ODST. For comparison, I am comfortable with the Noki Bay book in Super Mario Sunshine being just that, a random Easter egg thrown here to spark discussions about the game, with no real meaning behind it. I'm comfortable with that because Mario Sunshine doesn't primarily rely on environmental storytelling, and anyway, the Noki Bay book can only be seen by glitching the camera through a door that you can't normally open, so it's not like every player is going to see it. Halo ODST, on the other hand, heavily relies on environmental storytelling. If those glyphs truly were random symbols with no actual meaning, that would be a very cheap and very lazy way of creating mystery. That's just not how environmental storytelling should work in a Halo game, or in any other video game for that matter. This is why today I want to have my own take on the glyphs mystery. I want to see for myself if it is truly impossible to find a meaning to the glyphs, or if we can find some meaning. I want this video to be a response to RocketSloth's conclusion, so that the newcomers to the glyphs mystery aren't left with the conclusion that they are just cheap and lazy ways to create mystery. Unlike the investigations from 5 years ago, I won't search for weird esoteric reference to the Hollow Men or Dante's Inferno or the Land of Cactus, or trying to decipher the J signs found here and there in New Mombasa. I think of the glyphs the same way I think of the human-made graffitis found in the streets of New Mombasa. I think they do have a meaning and they are relevant to the game's story, but I don't think they are linked to some kind of super secret Easter egg that you could only access by deciphering their hidden meaning or something. In other words, I want to test if the glyphs found in New Mombasa have a meaning in the game's story, not some kind of super hidden Easter egg. With this presentation out of the way, I will take you through a tour of New Mombasa. We will visit every place where the glyphs can be found, and while we're at it, we'll also have a look at the other secrets this city holds. Before this, though, I want to list everything that we know for sure about the glyphs. Firstly, we know that the glyphs are written by the engineers. We also know that the engineers in the story are enslaved by the Covenant. They don't believe in the Covenant religion, they are forced to wear bombs that make them explode if they approach a human being, and some engineers are actively trying to defect to the UNSC. Therefore, the engineers need a way to communicate secretly, since standard data transfers are surely regulated by the Covenant. And since the glyphs are invisible through normal means, they can fill this role easily. Thirdly, as mentioned above, Joseph Staten, the lead writer for Halo, has stated that the Y glyphs are similar in shape to Forerunner ships, which might indicate that the story told in the glyphs is related to the Forerunners. However, we also know that not every glyphs can be related to the Forerunners, as many of the glyphs depict the Superintendent, which has nothing to do with the Forerunners. And 4. By looking into the file names for the glyphs images, we know that this glyph, depicting some kind of big circle, is probably depicting a halo ring. With this knowledge on our side, all we need to do is to drop once more into the streets of New Mombasa and start our exploration. And since the game, as always, starts us in Sector 5, let us start by exploring Sector 5. Right at the beginning, near the first health pack dispenser, you will find a tag on the wall. This one reads Twilight of Man. And it's also written weirdly high, like you would have to climb on a car or something to write a graffiti this high, which is possible, but yeah. In any case, it opens our exploration strong by depicting the desperation of mankind against the arrival of the Covenant. In fact, Sector 5 has the peculiarity of having the most graffitis out of all New Mombasa sectors, with, as far as I can tell, one instance of every graffiti in the game. On this wall we have two graffitis, Hell on Earth, which retrace the parallel between the Covenant invasion and Dante's descent into Hell from the Divine Comedy. And we have another graffiti that reads Covenant Go Home. On this wall, we have a similar graffiti that reads Get Off My Planet, showing that the inhabitants of New Mombasa, while utterly powerless against the Covenant, are nonetheless willing to let them know what they think of their invasion. Unrelated to the graffitis and the glyphs, we find a lone mailbox in the streets, which, now that I think about it, you really see very few mailboxes throughout the city, so it's weird that they still have mail, but so few mailboxes to go with it. On this wall, on this plaza, we have a glyph that reads Militia Enters Pit. If you recall Sadie's story, at some point in the Covenant invasion, there was an ONI propaganda agent boasting about the success of the militia against the Covenant forces. Well, this tag in the streets tells a different story. In the dead end of a closed-off road, we can see the corpse of a marine, or maybe a civilian armed with salvaged weapon, is difficult to tell. His blood spread on the wall under a graffiti that reads, Remember Rich. Perhaps this person was an inhabitant of Rich who managed to escape only to die here in the streets of New Mombasa on Earth. On another wall, we find another graffiti. Kinsler is a thug. Which, as you will know if you've listened to Sadie's story, is absolutely true. But it's still interesting to see that the average civilian was also aware of that fact, that Kinsler was a terrible person. So apparently there is another graffiti that can be found in the game, which reads You loot, I shoot, which refers to the fact that during the Covenant invasion, many people have rioted and started looting all the shops they could find, and the person who wrote this graffiti was evidently not okay with that. But I couldn't find this graffiti anywhere in the game, so I don't know. In any case, we are now arriving at the most interesting part of our journey, the glyphs. And we'll start by looking at the glyphs found in the weapon caches. The weapon caches can be found throughout the city of New Mombasa, but each weapon cache only becomes available after you found a certain number of audio logs. Each weapon cache contains different equipment, but they always contain the same glyphs. We have a bunch of Y glyphs surrounded by 3 other symbols, which are the most common type of glyphs found in the game. Though it looks like there are many variations of them, there are in fact only 2 variations, Type A and Type B. But each type can be rotated in any number of ways, which gives the impression that the glyphs are numerous and diverse, allowing the developers to save space on disk. For the rest of this video, I will refer to Type A and Type B as the normal glyphs. Inside weapon caches we can also find the large Superintendent glyphs, which depict the Superintendent. This glyph is always found in weapon caches and is only found in weapon caches, which makes its interpretation very straightforward.
it indicates a weapon cache, and it confirms that the weapon caches are administered by the Superintendent. Since every weapon cache in the game contains the same kind of glyphs, the large Superintendent glyph and some normal glyphs around it, I won't go into details for the next weapon caches we find. The other set of glyphs found in this sector is, of course, the one that leads to your first mission item, there's helmet. This set comprises a lot of normal glyphs, either written on the wall of a building containing the helmet, or in the hallways. Speaking of hallways, we find another Hell on Earth graffiti written in this hallway. While those glyphs seem to lead to the mission object, we can't be sure this is their purpose. This scene also features multiple dead bodies, both human and Covenant, so it's also possible that the glyphs have to do with the dead bodies. On our way to the next sector, we can find 2 more graffitis on the wall. UNSC equal liars and we are next. The graffiti on the left is interesting because we don't know when it was written. Was this glyph written during the Covenant invasion in order to criticize the inefficiency of the UNSC to stop the Covenant? Or was it written before the Covenant invasion in order to denounce the propaganda exerted by the UNSC on the human population? After all, we know from Halo Reach that the UNSC is not universally loved by the human populations, and rebellions were not uncommon. Oh, before we move on to the next sector though, I want to have a look at all the skyscrapers surrounding us, and the company logos depicted on their front. We find one called Hinos, one with simply a giant E, Jotun, a building that probably belongs to the UNSC, according to this icon, Feuder Construction, and Synoviet, which you might remember because in Halo Reach we do venture inside a Synoviet building. The next sector we visit is Sector 6, and already at the entrance we can surprise a few grunts quietly sleeping in a back alley. And I love the sound they make while sleeping. They seem to have escaped the surveillance of their brute leaders, and now that they are hidden in a back alley, it seems they can sleep all they want without being reprimanded. In a corner, we have another graffiti that reads, "Get off my planet." We also have another weapon cache that contains the same kind of glyphs we already discussed. Now, Sector 6 is unique among all the sectors because it is the only sector that contains the remains of elites that were apparently assassinated by the brutes. These dead elites are always surrounded by what I call empty glyphs, that is, simple Y glyphs printed on the wall. These empty Y glyphs are the only glyphs found around dead elites. No other glyphs can be found. We find a bunch of dead elites here, massacred in a back alley. There is another batch of dead elites here, in a courtyard. And the biggest batch of dead elites can be found here, ironically, under a human graffiti that reads "Believe." For your information, this batch of dead elites is the same one that you find during the mission Tayari Plaza. Although, when you play Tayari Plaza, the glyphs are not written on the wall, which indicates that they were written after the end of Tayari Plaza and before the moment we visit the streets of New Mombasa. The giant "Believe" graffiti is also very interesting because it's pretty generic. It could mean "believe in God" or "believe in the UNSC" or just "believe" as in "don't lose hope." There is, however, one last place that features dead elites and empty glyphs, which is this place, affectionately called Squidhenge in the community. Squidhenge features 2 dead elites on the ground and a batch of 6 stones, each covered with empty Y glyphs. but also a unique glyph that can only be found here, the sad Superintendent. Oh, and before you ask, it is clear from the stone's appearance that they were part of the courtyard's interior way before the arrival of the Covenant. So the engineers didn't place the stones here, they just thought it was a cool looking place, I guess. Speaking of engineers, there are two in Squidhenge, and interestingly, when you arrive in the place, they are in the process of either writing or reading the glyphs. And the last point of interest in Sector 6 is located on this plaza. It's a giant debris from the uplift that fell here when the uplift collapsed. And with that, we are on our way to Sector 8. Right as we enter the sector, we are greeted by an advertisement for the Yusuf Genet, a car brand that you might recognize because many of those cars are currently scattered through New Mombasa. We also find the same kind of door that's used to hide weapon caches, but with no weapons inside, and actually it's open without finding any audio log. Which makes me think, what were the original purpose of these rooms that are now used as weapon caches? Personally, I wonder if they are parking lots for maybe elephants or other vehicles used by the city. Behind this security door, we have another courtyard with two engineers chilling out. And a jackal sniper, but you know how it ends. Unlike Squidhenge, this courtyard doesn't have any glyphs, but it has an audio log. So I guess that's something. I have no idea what the engineers are doing in there. Maybe they feign doing nothing while they are watched by the jackal sniper. I don't know. This place is not that important aside from the audio log, but it's still weird. Oh, and also, I love the water running on the wall. It's very aesthetic. In some places in the streets, you will find signs such as these that welcome you to the city of New Mombasa in English, in what I assume to be a South African language, and in Japanese apparently. Yeah, okay. This welcome sign to New Mombasa also features this big lion, which seems to be the emblem of New Mombasa. In the bottom of an alleyway, behind the destroyed remains of a ghost, we can find another dead marine, his body spread on the ground among the trash. And on the wall, another graffiti, asking us to remember Rich. On this wall, in another street, there is another tag, saying "We are next." And now we can access one of the most interesting places in the whole city. This place. It is very similar to the one previously shown, but this one features a unique glyph, the one that is called Halo Glyph in the game files. And this large glyph, probably depicting a halo ring, is surrounded by several other empty glyphs. The same glyphs that we found near the dead elites, except this time, there are no dead elites around. Oh, and I did not mention it, but the courtyard also has a few engineers chilling around, probably reading the glyphs or writing some more. With this place covered, we have visited every place in the game that features the empty glyphs. Since we won't find any other empty glyph, I think now's the time to take a pause in our exploration and start questioning their meaning. A common theory is that these glyphs represent mourning or death. In his first video, RocketSloth says that this theory has been debunked for two main reasons, but I don't agree with those reasons at all. I think it makes sense to assume that these glyphs represent mourning or death. These glyphs are similar to the normal glyphs, except of course that they are empty, which could symbolize the feeling of absence caused by death and mourning. In this case, they would represent the mourning of the engineers towards the elites slaughtered by the brutes. Interestingly enough, the elites are the only species mourned by the engineers, which could indicate that the engineers have more respect for the elites than the other Covenant species and the humans, possibly because the elites were treating them with more dignity.
Squidhenge is a special case. It does contain a pair of dead elites, and the glyphs on the stones could be here to mourn them, but it also contains the unique sad superintendent glyph and 6 stones. By listening to the audio logs, we learn that Quick to Adjust, the engineer who absorbed Virgil and who we rescued during the game, was freed from his bombs only because 6 other engineers sacrificed their life for it. Indeed, when they removed the bombs from Quick to Adjust, their own bombs detected the betrayal and exploded. These 6 stones could symbolize the 6 engineers who died to free Quick to Adjust from his shackles, and this sad superintendent face might be a way for Quick to Adjust himself under the identity of a superintendent to honor his fallen saviors. Then we have another special case, the room with the glyph that depicts a halo ring. And honestly, if these glyphs do translate to mourning or death, their presence near a halo ring is no surprise. As we all know, the halo ring is a weapon designed to eradicate all sentient life in the galaxy, and it has been activated in the past, a fact that the engineer would surely be aware of. This room, with a halo glyph surrounded by empty glyphs, may be a memorial to the countless lives eradicated when the halo array was activated. There is another interpretation that we can make of these glyphs, and this one is based on Joseph Staten's remark that these empty white glyphs are shaped like forerunner ships. These glyphs may depict a story that took place some indefinite time ago, where a huge number of elites traveled through space on board of forerunner ships, possibly in an operation to populate or evacuate a halo, an operation that the engineers wanted to commemorate. To my knowledge, there is no such event in the lore of Halo, but I will let those of you more knowledgeable about the lore tell me if it makes any sense. With this done, we move on to the most southward sector of the map. Sector 9 is a very small sector, with only 2 points of interest. One of them is a weapon cache, with the usual glyphs. And the other one is a mission object, the drone camera that sends you on the mission Uplift Reserve. Interestingly, this mission object is also surrounded by normal glyphs, and this time there are no dead bodies on the ground. Aside from the mission object, I don't see any other point of interest that the glyphs could be related to. With Sector 9 done, we move on to Sector 10, which is an even smaller sector. The only point of interest here, aside from another weapon cache, is the mission item you find on the ground. And just like the 2 previous ones, this mission item is surrounded by normal glyphs. Actually, I won't keep you in suspense any longer. As you may have noticed if you played the game, every mission object found in the campaign is surrounded by a bunch of normal glyphs. Which, at first glance, might sound extremely weird. Are the engineers using the glyphs to document the journey of the ODSTs through New Mombasa? Why would the engineers care at all about the ODSTs? Well, if we recall the overall story, it all becomes clear. Although the ODST team was made aware of their mission very late, storming the data center to retrieve the engineer was always the mission from the very start. Extracting the engineer from New Mombasa was a long-term plan. Maybe the engineers bet on this outcome when they freed Quick to Adjust from his bombs. As we learn inside his story through the audio logs, Captain Dare was trying to get the superintendent back online after it was turned off by Kinsler.
As I've been trying to tell you, Captain, I don't have the authority to override. What do you mean, gross misconduct? Captain Dare, I assure you, people are dying down here.
Excuse me?
Yes, of course I could turn the superintendent back on, but Commissioner Kinsler gave me explicit instructions.
You're busy, so I'm just going to borrow this stapler.
Listen, Captain, there's a Covenant carrier hovering right outside my window. There's a sniper in my lobby, and you're threatening to have me fired? Office of Naval Intelligence. Now there's a contradiction in terms.
This is weird because, on paper, Dare should have no say in the matter. She is not even responsible for evacuating the city. But her attempts to turn the superintendent back online would make sense if she knew that it was crucial for the protection of the engineer until it can be extracted. It is even possible that the engineers were the ones to make contact with the ONI in the first place, through the superintendent's network. Additionally, at the end of the Tayari Plaza mission, right after Buck fails to join with Dare, he is contacted by an engineer who takes tremendous risks to communicate with him about Captain Dare, which proves that this engineer knew what was going on. All this to say, the engineers are aware that the Covenant is trying to find the defector and execute him. And they are also aware that the ODST team, led by Captain Dare, is by far their best chance of extracting him alive. Again, it might have been Plan A from the very beginning, as Captain Dare seemed to be aware of the importance of keeping the Superintendent online. Therefore, the engineers need to keep track of the ODST's status. They need to know if they are still alive, they need to know where they are going, and they need to know if they are still following the mission orders. And the glyphs we systematically find around the mission items would be a good way of doing that. My personal headcanon is that for each set of glyphs found near a mission item, the story told by the glyphs contains the exact same information that you witnessed during the mission. So, if we could actually read the glyphs found around the detonator, for example, they would tell us the unfolding of the mission ONI Alpha Site. Okay, with Sector 10 fully covered, we move to Sector 4. Once in there, we can see two graffitis denouncing the lies spread by the UNSC during the battle. Militia and trust pits, and UNSC equal liars. And ironically, these two graffitis are drawn right above a UNSC recruitment center. We can also find another weapon cache and another mission object. Both places are accompanied by the usual set of normal glyphs. In the case of a mission object, the glyphs are written near both entrances to the building and on the inside of the hallways. But Sector 4's most notable and intriguing location is by far the Sunken Plaza. Indeed, the entirety of Sunken Plaza is covered with glyphs. We find lots of the usual normal glyphs, but we also find a variation of Type B, the Super B, which harbors a superintendent symbol. Even more intriguing, a unique glyph with 3 superintendent symbols can be found in the bottom of the plaza. Unlike the previous spots where normal glyphs were found, the Sunken Plaza doesn't contain any mission object, or even any audio log. RocketSloth described the place by saying there is nothing important or relevant going on. There is no reason to actually go to this area. Which, strictly speaking, is not entirely true. Near the Sunken Plaza, we can find the remains of a scorpion, a wraith, and a warthog, as well as multiple sandbag barricades, which implies that the plaza was home to a very intense battle. Even more importantly, an ODST drop capsule can be found in a courtyard near the plaza. If we assume that the glyphs are only used to follow the ODST's journey through the city, as I proposed earlier, then these glyphs could have been written here to document the arrival of this ODST and the furious battle they took part in right after the drop, as if those glyphs were tied to a mission that we didn't get to play in the campaign. However, I don't think that's the case. The presence of a nearby ODST drop capsule is notable, but the Superintendent's logo on the glyphs is even more. The good thing with those glyphs is that we don't need to work hard to infer their meaning. Whatever these glyphs are saying, they are saying something about the Superintendent. And obviously, the Superintendent is a key factor in the engineer's secret plan, so it makes complete sense that they would discuss it. Personally, I think those glyphs were written by engineers trying to localize the Superintendent. The super big glyphs may indicate, okay, I think the Superintendent is nearby, but I don't know exactly where.
while the triple super could mean, "Guys, I located the superintendent, he's behind those doors!" Which is plausible since the sunken plaza is located near the center of the city. Alternatively, these glyphs might be dedicated to more general discussions about the superintendent and the engineer's plan. In that case, the triple super glyph might depict what Virgil eventually became: the combination of the superintendent, the subroutine known as Virgil, and the engineer named Quick to Adjust. A similar theory I found on the web claims that these glyphs might in fact represent the combination of the superintendent plus Virgil, Quick to Adjust, and a fragment of a Forerunner AI known as Mendicant Bias. So, although the specifics of what those glyphs mean remain uncertain, I am quite confident that they were written here by the engineers in order to discuss parts of their plans, especially parts related to the superintendent. We then move on to Sector 3, the second to last sector in the city. The first place we'll take a look at is actually pretty similar to the sunken plaza in terms of mystery. Behind this security door is an enclosed courtyard containing a pair of engineers and another set of glyphs. Most of them are normal glyphs, but we also find a single super big glyph among them. As with the sunken plaza, there are no mission items in this area, which makes its purpose difficult to tell. This time there is no ODST drop capsule around, at least not that I could find. There is an audio log, but I don't think it's related to the glyph since no other audio log is found near glyphs. As a matter of fact, this place is located pretty close to the sunken plaza, which could mean it could be a continuation of it, but I'm not convinced either. Our biggest clue for this courtyard is, again, the super big glyph, hinting that the nearby glyphs must be discussing some part of the engineer's plan related to the superintendent. Since this place is an enclosed courtyard, it makes it easier to hide from the Covenant, which might be why the engineers chose this place over the sunken plaza to continue writing their plans. But this place remains a mystery. We find another one of those doors that usually hide a weapon cache, but not this time. The underground highway under the city houses another squad of grunts who manage to escape the supervision of their leaders and are soundly asleep. Graffitis from desperate humans are written all around them, giving this scene a strong sense of tonal whiplash. But it still fits marvelously with the bewitching aesthetics of Halo ODST. And the last point of interest in Sector 3 is of course the mission object, Romero's sniper rifle, surrounded by a bunch of normal glyphs, although this time most of them are written on the floor. Sector 0 is rather small compared to most other sectors, but it does contain a hilarious secret to look at. You are here in front of Technic Electronics Building, the most generic electronics company in the galaxy. We can also find a few advertisements here and there, one for African Trust, the banking union in place in South Africa, and one for the new Mombasa Police Department. Interestingly, while New Mombasa's emblem is a lion, the emblem of its police force is an eagle. And our journey through the streets of New Mombasa concludes with the last mission object, which is surrounded by normal glyphs just like the others. So, what have we discovered today? Well, there are two main findings. Every batch of empty glyphs is tied either to a squad of dead elites or to the glyph that depicts a halo ring. And similarly, every batch of normal glyphs is tied either to the ODST's progression within New Mombasa or to the superintendent. And in the case of the normal glyphs found in the weapon caches, they are explicitly linked to both, since the caches are administered by the engineers through the superintendent and full of resources used to help the ODST team. Not to mention the giant superintendent glyph written on the wall. As we discussed a little earlier, Captain Dare was already trying to get the superintendent back online during Sadie's story, despite the fact that she shouldn't have any say on the matter. And an engineer tried to make contact with Buck after landing, despite knowing full well this would trigger the bombs placed on him. Thus, we have every reason to believe that the engineers and Captain Dare, and by extension the ODST team, were working together very early in the Covenant invasion. Since the ODST team led by Captain Dare, the Superintendent, and the engineers are all tightly linked together in one big plan to have an engineer defect to the UNSC, I think it's safe to assume that the glyphs surrounding the ODST mission objects and the glyphs surrounding the Superintendent glyphs all have the same purpose of discussing the plan and communicating it to all engineers without being spied on by the Covenants. So, what conclusion can we draw from this exploration? Well, to start with, we can nuance the conclusion that RocketSloth draws in his own video. The glyphs may not tell a super deep, super hidden story, but they do mean something and they have their place in Halo ODST's storyline. As far as I can tell, the glyphs are used for two main purposes. The empty Y glyphs are used to reminisce on the past. They are drawn to honor the death of the elites, as well as the deaths caused by the Halo rings. Or alternatively, they are used to commemorate an event that happened in the past, where many elites migrated on board of Forerunner ships. The normal glyphs, on the other hand, are used by the engineers to organize their plan of resistance against the Covenants. They are used to document information about the Superintendent and to keep track of the ODST's journey from New Mombasa to max out the chance that this daring plan may succeed. And with the help of the Alpha 9 team of ODSTs, the sacrifice of 6 engineers, and your help as the player, this mission might actually succeed. I think my theories are maybe 70% correct. There are still large grey areas in them, but I believe the outlines are quite clear. Of course, I have to thank the entire Halo community for the incredible work they put into documenting the glyphs. I may not agree with RocketSloth's conclusion, but the map he released on Reddit, documenting all the glyphs found in New Mombasa, allowed me to start my exploration with a decent idea of what I was stepping into, and that was a huge help. I hope this video was able to balance out the pessimistic conclusion on RocketSloth's video, and I hope it gave you a new perspective on the most human story ever told in a Halo game. Thank you for watching.